Hi everybody. I got a new mic. Isn't that exciting? Well, I don't know. It's like moderately exciting because I did a test and I didn't like love the way it sounds, but it's better than the setup that I had before. So hello, welcome. Today I want to talk about Wally Wood or Wallace Wood. You can see the picture of him in the corner, and I want to talk about um, I want to talk about uh, sort of the scenario of this piece. And so it's a work of his called Canon, and it was something that it was like a passion project for him. If I'm listening to the um if I'm reading the Amazon reviews correctly. So this was like something that he did because he was like, "Oh man, I love it." And so I just want to like run the situation by you. So like say you're walking down the street and this like portal opens up in front of you, and like this person jumps out and they're like hey, hey, you're the only one that can do it, and we need you to come back in time and kill Hitler. And you'd be like, "Oh my gosh, this portal opening, going back in time. Wait, who's Hitler?" And they'd be like, "Well, the fact that you don't know who it is means that you were successful in killing him." Uh, and you'd be like, "Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, killing somebody is like a pretty like weighty moral dilemma, and like I don't know if that's like something that like I'm able to do." And the person who jumps out of the portal is like, "Well, I mean, I just gotta tell you ahead of time that like Hitler's pretty bad. Like Hitler is a pretty bad person. And you're gonna like do the world a favor if you kill them." And then you'd be like, "Well, geez, it's just this. Maybe I should go home, talk to my friends." Um, and then the person's like, "Well, this portal, it's not gonna stay open forever. But you know what I could do? I can promise that if you go back in time and kill Hitler, you're gonna see some grade A titties." And you'd be like, "That's very convincing. Are the titties Hitler's?" And they'd be like, "What? No, Hitler's a man." You'd be like, "Well, I don't know. I've never heard of Hitler." And you'd already be through the portal because you're like, "Well, going back in time and seeing nice titties, like what else? What else can a person ask for?" And that is basically the plot of Canon. So I have drawn underwear on every instance of the lady where she is naked, and you can see that's 4 out of 5 of the panels that she appears in. And the thing about it, like when you read the reviews of this on Amazon, it's like, "Oh, this is great. This is like Bond, but better. And all the women take their clothes off immediately." And it's like, yeah. I mean, that's Wally Wood for you. I was like, when I was like looking, like reading about Wally Wood, like some of the things that I've found. Also, this pen, it's making kind of some like it's getting. There we go. I'm trying a different pen. This is the G Pen one. Ooh, I must have made this because it has one by it. It's a variation of a free brush from this guy named George who does like 10 million free brushes, and I have the link in the description. Yeah, so I'm like looking into Wally Wood, and I noticed that he has a theme of like drawing stories about like defeating Nazis or yeah, I mean the titties is, horny dude comics, whatever. But the Nazi focus is a little bit surprising. I don't know. Well, I mean, it's surprising until you like learn about him. And so he's drawing this. So this is actually like a Cold War setting. So like Nazism is still alive, which is like kind of depressing, but really true. I remember on MTV like Nazis are bad, and now it's like maybe Nazis aren't bad. I'm like, no, they're definitely bad. Yeah, and so so his wife like had to she was a German Jew and she had to flee Germany. And she also did a lot of like coloring for comic books, but it's like, oh yeah, if your wife was a Jewish person who had to flee Germany, I could see why you might have like a close connection to like fantasizing about seeing titties and killing Hitler. Like it makes a lot of sense. And it turns out there were a lot of comics in that area, in that era, not that area, in that era that were sort of in the same boat where it was like, oh, this was a really awful thing that happened to my people. So maybe I'm going to write wish fulfillment fantasies where Nazis are the enemies and I get to kill them. Yeah, so I think that's like Wally Wood and Nazis. But the reason that I wanted to ink this particular comic is, or just to talk about Wally Wood in general, is a while back, or in one of the other live streams, I was just talking about Hal Foster and sort of how he had drawn a Prince Valiant strip where he goes to America and he like hangs out with Native Americans, and just sort of like how that can sometimes be problematic. Not in, I don't know, it's this stuff is also loaded. Like I feel like even if I say the word problematic, people are, if anyone were to be listening ever, would sort of jump down my throat or like accuse me of being too social justice warrior-y, or if like a social justice warrior was listening, they'd be like, oh, you don't go far enough, like you need to like, so it's like you can't win, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't say things. I don't know. So it's sort of like I'm not Native American. Like I have no like right to speak about like my experience of Prince Valiant and Native American strips. Like I feel like that's something that like people with Native American ancestry, like that's for them to like tell how they feel about it, good or bad. Like it's not for me to be like it's good or it's bad. It's just like, hey, like maybe like historically depictions by non-natives of native cultures have been, you know, sort of kind of rough for Native Americans to like have to see. So yeah. And I realized that it was like, well, there is like one aspect of comics that I am more qualified to speak on, and that's like comic depictions of women. And I don't know, I don't know, I was just like researching stuff about it and I was thinking about it, and like my first thought was like this strip, which I was like, when I was like looking for like Wally Wood stuff to practice on, like I obviously found this strip, and I think it's hilarious because it's like, if you're I'm going to call this sexism and then I'm going to come back and define the term, but like if you're like thinking about like what it means to have sexist media, like this is kind of what people think of, where it's sort of like the leader, like this woman, her only purpose in the story is to take her top off and have it implied that she sleeps with the protagonist. Like he doesn't go so far as to show that, but that's like definitely an aspect of this comic where it's just sort of like the woman exists merely as a sex object. And given what I said about Native Americans and like sensitivity and like, oh, you might want to watch out for that, you might expect that I'd be like, oh, this is awful, but I don't know. Like I can only speak about my experience, I guess, and like the thing about comic books is that sometimes I feel like it gets really heated, like discussions of sexism or in comics. So, and I'm going to come back to that word sexism, but a lot of times when people are like, comics are really sexist, that this is how the conversation goes. It's that, oh, I shouldn't be spending so much time filling in all this stuff. Okay, no, that's okay. We've got time. It'll be like, wow, women's bodies in comics are really unrealistic, and that depiction of women's bodies as like perfect sexual objects is pretty harmful to the women who are reading them. And it's also harmful to the men and boys that are reading it because it like presents women as sex objects, and you know, and then sometimes the conversation goes, well, or like the response to that sometimes is, well, men's bodies are also depicted really unrealistically. And if you like look at like Batman or Superman or something, like these like stacked muscle men where it's like, oh yeah, and then the response from that is, well, men aren't being portrayed as sexual objects. What's being portrayed there is like a male power fantasy. And what they don't say, and I wish they did, is that like, well, actually men really like looking at muscular men, like more so than women. But that's a conversation for another day. So it's like, it feels like the conversation about women's and women in comics and women's bodies in comics is sometimes like not very productive, because like that's where it goes, where it's like people think it's like, oh, like people are mad that Wonder Woman is wearing like shorts and everyone else gets to wear pants, or like that I think it's like Power Girl has like a boob window in her costume, where it's like, or like they're like costumes are drawn skin tight on women, and like they have like huge boobs and are always like posed in like ways that are just like obviously cheesecake poses. And again, I'm not an expert. Like, I'm not like an expert in this. I'm not like in charge of how you feel about comics. And I haven't done like a PhD dissertation on gender relations in comics. But what I will say is that when people think of comics as being sexist, it's like you can't get any more blatant than this in terms of like the woman existing solely as a sex object for the man. Like she's literally, he's like, he doesn't even like seek her out. He's like, hey, what? Might as well amuse ourselves while we're waiting. Like that's what she says. And then it's implied later, ... is that they like did it. And honestly, I mean, she's beautiful. Like, why not? She's beautiful. She wants to, like, it's consensual. Like, everything's nice. And here's why I keep being like, well, so one, like the definition of sexism, I like looked it up before I did this live stream, because I was like, I feel like it's a word I throw around a lot, and I like didn't really look up like what the meaning of it was. And it's like having to do with stereotypes. It has to do with like gender roles. It has to do with like a bunch of stuff. And are comic books sexist? And it's like, maybe. It depends. Do they present stereotypical depictions of women? Yes. Are there also stereotypical depictions of men? Yes. Should we have a conversation about gender in America and how it's portrayed in media? Yes, absolutely. But the reason I keep hesitating is, and I keep feeling like I'm saying a lot, is that I understand that this is a genre. Like, this is a fantasy. And it's a fantasy, like, aimed at some particular people. Horny men, horny dudes. And I think, like, the original publication for this particular thing was a comic that went to soldiers overseas. And that's how, like, that's why there is a naked lady. Like, other Wally Wood comics will have the woman from behind. And you'll see, like, maybe a little bit of butt. But you won't see full-on boobs like you will in this comic. And it's because that at the time comics were censored. But I am perfectly willing to like have like comics for men, I guess, where it's just sort of like, oh, this is like a really fun fantasy. Like before when I was talking about the time traveler, like if someone came up to you and was like, hey, you're gonna go back in time and kill Hitler and see great boobs, you'd be like, sign me up, like I'm ready. I don't think there's anything wrong in that sort of like super isolated case with like depicting a story where a man gets to go do like fun stuff, or like dangerous stuff, or like escapist stuff, and then also like see beautiful women naked. Like I don't think that's like the end of the world, or that's like a sign that like society has fallen. I'm like, that's pretty much the way it's been, since the beginning of time. And I think there's also sort of similar things that happen in genres that are stereotypically marketed towards women. So like if you think about the movie Cinderella, the original 1950s animation, it's like the prince in that movie doesn't have a name. Like he's just the prince. And like they give him a name like later in like, you know, Disney lore. But like in the movie itself, like he is never even named. Like he only exists to be the prince in that movie. And I'm gonna say some caveats. Like I'm gonna address some caveats later. So it's like if you're telling me like that there's like a fantasy element to comics and that the fantasy is more targeted towards men, I'm not going to be like, okay, well you have to like Batman now has to be you know, he has like all those kids, so like Dick Grayson's now like you know, Danielle Grayson, and like you have to have like women in like, you know, modest superhero clothes, and like you know, it's like Batman's fighting for women's liberation or something. Like I'm just like, I'm happy to have comics be a genre where like those are the stories that are the themes, because I think that, I don't know, like entertainment is meant for escapism, and sometimes that's the escape you want. You want to be Bond, you want to like be a really good fighter, you want to like indulge and have like carnal relations with beautiful women. Like I'm not mad about that. And but the thing I think for me, like as I've been thinking about this, like as I was thinking about doing this live stream, where it's like if you can't say that the medium of comics though is only for men, because it's just a medium. It's not like it's sort of like, I feel like sometimes people hold really tightly like when comics are sexist, and it's like, no they're not, or sexism isn't real. It's like comics themselves aren't like, they're just a device to tell stories. So it's like, is the comic industry in America, does it mainly cater to men? Yes. Would they tell stories by women writers with women artists? I don't know, because their focus is men. You know, it's sort of like they're going to tell stories that men want to buy and men want to read. And sometimes that can be really frustrating if like you're trying to like say pitch a comic, or you're like a girl who really likes comics and you're like, oh man, I would love to participate in this. Here's my comic about a woman. And they're like, no, we only do men. Like that's like kind of hard to hear. And then if like the answer is also like, oh well, if you're just like, if you want it so bad, like do it yourself, it's like, well, that's a lot of work. I'm not saying it's a wrong answer, but it's like, it is a lot of work to like create something new, and like, I don't know. So I guess it's just sort of like, it's something that I want to like keep an eye on, I guess. I don't want to like not acknowledge that for some people like this kind of imagery is like just another example of like sexism in media, or ways that women are objectified in media. And it's like but on the other hand, I'm like, I don't know, sometimes it's a fantasy. I think I've really been like thinking about this a lot, because I don't want to like say this kind of stuff shouldn't exist, because there are people that really like it, and I think it's like, okay, so here's the other thing I wanted to compare it to, where it's like romance novels for women. And I think a lot of times when men or people who haven't read romance novels bring them up, they're like, well, that's, women have romance novels, that's like their porn. And it's like, I don't know, like it's not really the same thing. You know, a romance novel will be like 300 pages long, and there will be like an escalation of like carnal activity that, you know, culminates in sex, but it's not the focus. The focus of the story, well, it depends on the book, but like the focus of the story is often the romance, and there's like an incredible number of subgenres. I would say romance novels are sometimes more like this, where it's like it's like a woman's fantasy, or like the idea of I don't know, I feel like it's even like maybe too much to say woman's fantasy, but it's like the traditional like idea of a woman's romance, where it's like a relationship that leads to love and marriage, and maybe some good sex along the way. But I guess the point with romance novels is that there is similar media for women, and there isn't the same sort of pushback to have like more diverse representation, or like, you know, what if there's one where they don't get married, or like, it's like the genre like stays in its lane and it sells really well, and so I'm like, why is there this push for comics to be more inclusive and not say romance novels. And I have a theory, and since I was wrong about Prince Valiant, just know I can be wrong about everything. But so there's this video on the internet. Okay, so when you're sad, what do? What kind of videos do you watch on the internet? I love soldiers coming home from war, and like surprising family members, like because they cry, I cry, like everybody cries. Sometimes you just need a good cry. And so there's this video of like the soldier, and he's coming home and he's surprising his 3-year-old son. I like these camels. I like these camel heads. So he's surprising his 3-year-old son, and the way that he does it is that he dresses up like Spider-Man, and he climbs his back fence. And when his son sees him, he doesn't know that it's his dad. He just knows that all of a sudden Spider-Man is at his house. And when Spider-Man jumps over the fence, the first thing that the little boy does is he runs up to the Spider-Man, who he doesn't know who his father. It could be anybody under there. And he gives him a hug. He hugs Spider-Man immediately. This is a 3-year-old. So characters that are associated with comic books, like Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, Black Panther, Thor, Captain America, and these are all superhero comics, of course. They are marketed very aggressively towards young children. I'm going to change my pen. I'm not loving the changes that I made, whatever it is. So like if it's like Halloween and you are handing out candy, what I like to see is like how many kids are Superman, how many kids are Spider-Man. And the last time I gave out candy, a lot of kids were Black Panther, and it was super cute. But these comic characters, or comic books in general, are really heavily marketed towards kids, and especially boys. So it's sort of like, if you start to go back and like look, you're like, oh, I love Spider-Man, let me get some more Spider-Man for my kid. Like, you're gonna start to see those comics where like Mary Jane is like, you know, like there's one that's really infamous where she's like sitting on the couch and in like an anatomically impossible condition, and like she has her like arms under her chest, and it's like, that's not bad, but it's like romance novels, Harlequins are not marketed towards little girls. You can make the argument that like romance is marketed towards little girls, but not in that such like same way. Like, name one romance novel character. You can't. Maybe you could. And The Notebook doesn't count. Nicholas Sparks does not count. And I would also say that like Cinderella, when they did the live action remake, in the they gave the prince a name and a storyline. So he's like a whole developed character. He goes through a character arc. He like has trauma. So they're like two people that come together. And there's also been a lot of pushback in like women's media where it's like Disney princesses. It's like, oh, we can't have them like marrying the first person they meet when they're 16. I'm looking at you, Sleeping Beauty. And also Ariel. Ugh. And Rapunzel's 18. Oh boy. Okay. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot to say in a lot of different kinds of media. It's not easy. And I think sometimes comic books get it a little bit harder because for women, sometimes it's like the reason that women object to being treated as a sex object is because it sometimes has really negative consequences. I would have to look up the exact statistics, but if you look at the reasons why in the United States why women are murdered, like what's the number one cause of murder? Like who is murdering women? It's their partners. Like that's the majority of, or there's a big majority of women like causes of murder is that she's in a romantic relationship and she is killed by her partner. And this is not to say that it doesn't also happen to men, because it does, but it's in a much, much smaller percentage. So when women are like, man, why are men like murdering us? And why do men seem to feel that we're sex objects? It's like comic books are an easy thing to reach for, because like changing society itself is a lot harder. And so it's like, oh, well, maybe if we could just get Wally Wood to stop drawing so many titties, like it'll fix everything, and it won't. And I also think it's important for men to have fantasy escapist content, just like maybe not with murder. I don't know. Basically, I feel like this has been a really long-winded way to say it's okay to have titties in comics. Um, no, like I'm not mad about it, and I'm not mad that comics are like mainly marketed towards men. Like that's fine. That's also fine. Like men can have things. Um, I did laugh when I saw this comic though, because I was like, "Oh, classic!" Like, there's no way you could have a comic like this today. Like especially with just such that like graceless, like, "Oh, hey, we're here. We're gonna go see." I guess this is like Cold War Hitler. I don't know, where it's like people are like, "Yeah, we really like that Hitler guy. We're gonna keep doing it," and then this comic is about like, "No, you're not," because it's such a like blatant example of like the woman only being there for that reason. I feel like if Wally Wood was around today, they would like take all the beautiful women in this series and like make it one woman, and like I don't know, maybe she'd like do badass things too. Like they would change. They would. I feel like this story would be a hard sell today for mass market. Like I feel like you might be able to get away with it through another publisher, but not. This wouldn't be like a big screen movie. Although maybe it would. Maybe Jason Statham would like play. That looks pretty good. I mean, it looks alright. It looks like a thing. I don't know if the faces are like the best, but I'm always so fascinated by these background pieces. Because I want to draw landscapes better, and people like Wally Wood and Hal Foster do such a good job of like creating atmospheric backgrounds. That's what I really like about their work. Yeah, I think about it too. Like, I don't know. I was like looking up statistics about like the comic book industry, and like the majority of characters are men, and the majority of dialogue is male, and the majority of panels have men in them. And I'm not mad. Like, that's fine. But it's just sort of like hard when it's like, oh yeah, it's also the same in movies and TV shows. Uh, it's it's just you. Sometimes you can get the sense that it's like women or women identifying are willing to go along with male stories, but men are less interested in stories about women, and that can be kind of like hard, but not impossible. I feel like now that more women have access to things like YouTube, like things like ways to learn about this stuff, and like ways to write, and like avenues for self-publishing, like I'm hoping that like stuff will come out of that, where it's like we can have a greater diversity of media, and that everyone can find stories about things they like, and then we can get back to having big titty Hitler comics. I'm sorry, I just really like saying the word titties, so I just like keep like finding excuses to say it. I'm sorry, it's not appropriate. I'm like, this is a family show, although no one watches it. I did get this new mic. I don't know, it's funny like streaming something. I read an article once on The Verge, and it was about like Twitch streamers who stream to no one, which is like me live streaming this to no one. No one watches it. And in the previous episodes that I did, or the live streams, I can see why, because like when I listen back to them, I have to turn up the volume all the way to like even hear anything that I'm saying. So like technically they're not good. I crack myself up though, so it's like I'm not the kind of person that hates the sound of my own voice. Oh man, where was I going with that? Oh, it's a family show. Yeah, just sort of talking about live streaming to no one. And so it's like it's like, oh, it was nice to read that article, because it's like it's not just me. Like I'm not the only like weirdo just like talking to myself in my room on Monday night. But also the hope is that like someday someone would stumble upon this and find it entertaining enough to listen to. I do think it's hard. There's like people that watch stuff like this on YouTube, but they're usually watching people who are professionals. You're not like, oh man, let me see this amateur person trying to ink things that are already inked. Like that's not like adding value to your life. Like the value would come, I guess, if you wanted to like listen to me like be like, are comics sexist? I don't know. I didn't do any research, so just you have to listen to the things I thought about. Also, I like this pen, by the way. Yeah, I'm just feel like the market of people who would want to listen to me talk about this like is small. And also like I don't really want to tell my friends about it because it's like a lot. Like I live stream for like an hour. The 2 weeks that I've done it, I keep talking like I'm some big thing. But it's like I see the analytics. I don't want to be like, you guys, I did this thing, and then like they'll be like, oh yeah, I'll check that out, and then they don't. And also they can talk to me in person. They don't have to like listen to me ramble. I wonder if Wally Wood ever went to the desert, like if he ever saw camels. Like, I know, like it's not like he like was drawing this in the like olden days where like there weren't even libraries or something. Like, I just wonder like how did he get his references? Like, how did he know what to draw? And it's like you see those old timey paintings where, or I guess like Michelangelo is like a really good example where the I guess maybe this is from a comic or something where it's like, hey, Michelangelo, you've seen a naked woman, right? And he's like, oh, yeah, totally. I've seen, lots of naked ladies. Like, I've seen all of them. And then, like, he just draws, like, basically super muscular men with, like, some grapefruits bolted on. Like, it's really bad. Like, his drawings, like, he's a marvelous painter, but his paintings of women are rough, like especially the ones in the Sistine Chapel. They're like they could bench like 500 pounds. But yeah, so it's like, how did he know how to draw these camels? Like, how did he know how to draw that little car? Like, how did he know how to do that? I read in some of the reviews of this particular work that like people really liked it, but also that it got kind of bad at the end, and where he's just like, instead of drawing backgrounds, he's using high contrast photos, which I'm like, more power to you, dude. Like, and he would just sort of like paste like his own. So I feel like he like maybe started strong and then didn't like finish strong with this particular work. I haven't read the whole thing, so I can't say for sure. But I also read there's like a book that just came out last year, I think, and I should have written down the name. This is why people don't watch this. It's because I don't do any research. But it was about just basically the Jewish comic reaction to World War II, and sort of just some of the stories that came out, like Captain America punching Hitler, and like Superman, just looking into the Jewish experience of comics in the wake of World War II. And Wally Wood was one of the ones that was featured in that. And so I guess what he did is he worked for EC Comics. And he did a story where it was like, there's a sequence called Shock and Suspense. Oh, that gives me an idea. I have another story to tell you. But so he does the story. It's called Shock and for this magazine called Shock and Suspense, which I have, and it was also like kind of sexist, but like well, I'll tell you how. And he did this story where it was like this guy who he finds out, like he's been like treating Jewish people like crap, and then he finds out that he himself was Jewish all along. I feel like that was like a theme for a lot of stories like back in the day, where it was like, oh no, I found out I'm this thing that I've been like hating on. And it's like, you shouldn't have to find out that you're like a part of that group. But like, I feel like that was like a dramatic storyline. But so Wally Wood wrote that one about like someone finding out that they were Jewish. And yeah, if I think of it, I'll link to the book. or you know what, just drop a comment and remind me, hypothetical listener. Um, okay, so I, before lockdown, we're only sort of in lockdown. Like the library is, you can pick stuff up there. You can't go in, but you can pick stuff up. But I got one of the Shock and Suspense collections from EC Comics from the library because I'm cheap. And ooh, this is great practice. Uh, so I get it, and the very first story I read is a story about two women who like behave badly to their husbands, and they behave badly in like a 1950s kind of sexist way, in that one of them goes off to become a model and one I think like goes out into the business world, and they like leave their husbands behind to do such horrible back-breaking work as like feed the children and take care of them, and the husbands are just like so devastated, and the story ends with the husbands killing the wives in like ways that are related to the thing. Like, so the wife that becomes a model is like baked alive in like a tanning accident because of the husband, and like the subtle implication is like, oh, you drove your husbands to it, where it's like that's like a story that's like way more problematic than this one. But so I'm reading it and I'm like, oh geez. And I was at again, pre-pandemic, I was at a restaurant. I was eating shrimp tacos, and they were delicious. And so I'm sitting there, I'm eating my tacos, I'm reading it, and I just was thinking to myself, I'm like, man, like what does this do to a guy to read this kind of stuff? Like to see this story and to like see the like, do they like, does a guy reading it now like recognize like that, like the themes of this are actually pretty disturbing, and like even though the men are like punished for killing their wives, there's sort of this like nudge nudge wink wink, didn't they deserve it, like, oh god, like how do you. But then I was like, oh, you know, this came out a long time ago, I bet you know, who of our generation would have read this. And I'm almost 40. Like I keep saying I'm 40, but I'm almost 40. And the guy sitting next to me, like he sees what I'm reading, and he goes, and he's younger than me, I think. He was like maybe in his 20s. He's like, oh my gosh, are those EC Comics? And I was like, oh yeah. And he's like, oh my gosh, I love those. I used to read them. And I'm like, oh no, here's the very guy that I'm like, oh, he's the guy. And he's on a date. I swear this happened. So I was like, and so then I realized I'm like sitting, you know, at a shared table with the guy who's read this as a kid, and he's on a date. So I like obviously start listening in on their date, and you know, it seems somewhat normal. He seemed like a little self-centered, like, or maybe just like the chemistry between them wasn't like quite right. But that was definitely a moment of like, oh no, here he is. And I was actually like really a little bit worried for EC Comics, because that was like the first story in the collection, and I was like, are they all like this? And then the second story was an illustrated Ray Bradbury story, and that was very good. And I'm like, okay, so this is actually kind of legit. And I do enjoy those EC comic collections. There's like a bunch of them with different themes, and they're all like targeted towards guys and like favor or like have reflections of like the male psyche and the male fantasy. But you know, that's fine. Not everything has to be for me. I can still like enjoy the artwork that comes with, and like think about the time that they were created. Only during I think. Like I've seen other things of Wally Woods where like these are actually like cut out of something, and I feel like I'm really not set up for this. But okay, so I'm just gonna zoom in and like see if you can see it. Like, do you see these lines like here? Those were made with an Ames ruler, AMES, and that's what they use to like get the right line up for the type. Oh, this like learning to letter, it would be like a whole different, like that's a whole nother kettle of fish. Like we'll get there someday, but not today, as I continually keep lettering. So I do listen back to these live streams. A lot of times I cringe because I'm like, oh, you should just shut your trap. Like, nobody cares. Not about, like, obviously I keep doing it, but just like even just talking about sexism, I'm like, God, I just want to, like, not talk about that in, like, one avenue, but also I feel like I have to because it's important. But in the last live stream, one of the things I did was I was, like, talking about my favorite candy bar. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's what everyone's here to see. Like, my favorite candy bar. But I was just surprised because I couldn't, like, easily name it. And I love candy. Like, when I was a kid, when it was Halloween or Easter or Christmas, I would, like, hoard the candy in my room and I would, like, slowly eat it over months, essentially. And I just, like, I loved it because those are times of year that you get a lot of different kinds of candy. But I've turned into, like, one of those people, like, so. Also, this face is very stressful, but it's gonna turn out. It's gonna turn out fine. I've turned into one of those people that, like, stuff's too sweet for me now. And I always used to make fun of, like, so, like, the judges on, like, any reality cooking show, like, if anyone makes a dessert that has, like, even the slightest bit of sugar, it's like, oh, it's too sweet. Oh, it's just too sweet. And the person will be like, oh, this is what I make for my kids, and they love it. And be like, oh, yes. But the sweetness, too much. And it's kind of to the point where I'm like, they just really want, like, second dinner. Like, they don't want desserts. But also, it's kind of me. Like, a lot of candy bars are, like, super sweet, and the chocolate is really poor quality. In America, anyway, like, American candy bars are kind of cheap. And so I'm like, oh man, like, what does that say about me that I'm at the point in my life where I can't, like, easily name a candy bar I want to eat? And the truth is that the candy bar I really wanted was, like, they have this one, and God, this is an adult thing too, where it's, like, in the organic section and it's, like, really nice dark chocolate. It's, like, basically a, like, fancy Snickers bar. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I want. I want fancy Snickers. I don't want other stuff. She's pretty. I think Wally Wood sometimes, like, when he draws female bodies, he, like, has a, like, kind of odd way of drawing their hips, or, like, a way of drawing their hips that I wouldn't draw. It's not so much in this one. But sometimes he does, like, really, like, I don't know, like, blocky hips, like this instead, where they, like, come out that way. And it's, like, just, to me, not a super attractive look, but I'm also not, like, horny dude, so like, I'm not, like, the best person to ask. Yeah, it is interesting how pervasive, like, I'm thinking back again about that kid that hugged Spider-Man. I, like, almost gasped when I saw the video because I was so, like, oh my gosh, like, this seems dangerous to have, like, a character that is so beloved by kids that they would just go to them. I mean, the kid's mom was there, so, like, maybe that was, like, it wasn't like the kid was, like, alone in the backyard. And I think there were definitely, like, media characters that I would have gone to in an instant. There's, like, a famous story that my family tells about me, is that we went to Disneyland when I was 6 years old, and it's like I thought the character that played, or the person in the Snow White outfit was Snow White. And, I obviously, like these characters are really powerful for kids, and that they identify with them, they want to be them. They're often the first introduction towards, like, sort of fantasy storytelling, although I guess, like, Pat the Bunny or, like, Goodnight Moon, I don't know. Like, maybe I'm just pulling stuff, like, completely out of my butt. But, it's like, so many kids know who Batman is, and, like, Batman is not, like, a kid's, well, okay, I'm gonna finish my thought, and then I'm gonna say why I'm wrong. But, like, Batman, the movie Batman is not for kids. Like, if you think of, like, the first Chris Nolan Batman, like, that is not a movie for kids. Or, like, the Joker Batman, and I'm sure kids saw it, but it's like that is like serious film. And also it's Batman. Yeah, or it's like if you think about like the Zack Snyder Superman movies, which I try not to do because it raises my blood pressure, but like those movies are not made with children in mind, yet children love these characters, and it's because they have cartoons. Like they have cartoons to like sort of introduce them to them. Like they have cartoons that introduce them to the Avengers, and to just sort of comics generally. But like these characters aren't like, they're like cultural property. Like they are things that influence our world. If you go to any store, like a kid's gonna be able to get a Batman T-shirt. And I gotta say, like the other character that kids really like that I don't always understand is Darth Vader. Like kids, they're like, oh yeah, they don't understand that he's the bad guy. And I guess he's like a morally ambiguous character, but he's also like a pretty bad dude for a lot of times. Kids love Darth Vader, which is hilarious to me. Also, I realize like I'm trailing off a lot, so it's like when I listen to this back, hopefully I'll like get better at this particular mic. I really don't like the way this mic sounds, but it's it's it beats the alternative. I'll just say that. For me, I always really liked Superman, and it wasn't even that I liked the like. And I'm trying to think of like, how did I know about Superman? Because like I said, I didn't really read comics. I didn't really like, by the time I would have had access to comics, I didn't really read. Like they just weren't available to me. Like my brother didn't read comics besides Mad Magazine, so like what are you gonna do? But Superman like just shows up in like so much media. Like so there was, when I was in high school, there was the show Smallville, and that was about Superman going to high school. And if you ever watch like some terrible show on UPN that's like I guess The Flash or Green Arrow or something like that, it's like you have Smallville to thank for that. There was also, when I was younger, there was God, was it called Clark and Lois? And it had Dean Cain, and he played Superman, and and Terry Hatcher played Lois Lane, and I think also there was like a Superman cartoon show. So it's like, one of the things I think that's tough about some men's media is that one, men want to make other versions of it because they love it. Like men love Superman, and women. Everybody loves Superman, except for people with these goody two shoes. But then you've got Batman. Like if you don't like Superman, you got Batman. And so in some ways, like media that was originally intended for men, and like to like tell stories that men, and when I say the word men here, I just mean like people classified as men in America in a particular time with stereotypical interests that may or may not be appropriate. It's like men in quotations. It's assumed that it's universal, and so that it's then remade for a universal audience. And sometimes it kind of loses that like for menness that it comes with, or like the for menness, like I would define for menness as like this lady who just like takes off her top. It's like this is something that is for men and women who like titties. And although I feel like women who are attracted to women would not be as interested in like being this guy, but I can't say. I don't want to like speak for everybody. Also, side note to myself, once again, I need to figure out how to get the drawing and the audio to sync up better so I can talk about the actual drawing more. But, see, this wheel has kind of like that, like, brush texture, like that line right there. Like, that's something that, like, I don't know, works well with like a single stroke of a brush. I watch inking videos online, which is how I got kind of the idea for this. And a lot of times the inkers don't do the single stroke like I'm doing, or like I'm trying to do. Is that they'll do like multiple strokes, and I don't like. Geez, can I even try it? Like I was watching one today where it's like you do kind of this like stroke, 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 and as long as you like line them up, you know, it looks like one full stroke. See, I can't even do it. Like, yeah, that's not great. But I just feel like if I can like learn to do it in like one line, I'll be better off because I'll be able to work faster. Sort of that like titch, titch, titch. I'm sure like you can like I'm sure it's fine. Like I'm sure it's fine to do it that way. I just want to see if I can do it this way, because then you only have to draw one line instead of many. But time will tell. The other thing is that a lot of times they're doing digital inking in Clip Studio, which I think used to be Manga Studio. So it's like they're not using Procreate, which I'm using now. And I would like to get... Oh, see, look, I got the line to meet up right there at the end. I'd like to get Clip Studio because it seems like the brushes are really good. But it's also expensive. It's like $200. So maybe next month. Or maybe I'll save up. Because I did just get this microphone, which is really a gaming headset. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I should have just like tried it with like the cheap headphones I already had. But it's too late now. Now I have a weird gaming headset and I don't do online gaming like that. I suppose I could always like sell it or donate it. I'm sure someone would want something like this headset that you can't see. I'm sure this is fascinating information for you, hypothetical listener. Wally Wood was... I mean, there's a reason that people keep coming back to him, and he's really good at drawing people. Like, sometimes I get, like, not depressed, but just like, like, I just wish I was one of those people that was, like, naturally good at drawing. And I feel like that's, like, even a myth. Like I don't want to, like, have to, like, work hard. But I definitely think there are people whom drawing comes really easy. And I'm like, oh, it's too late. Like, I'm too old. Like, or, like, worse, that I can put in all the effort and I'll just never be good at it. Like, I'll never be able to draw people realistically. Like, I'll never be able to, you know, like, represent things visually in a way that's good. And I just have to remind myself that, like, you really can learn this stuff through practice, or at least that's what I'm hoping. Like, I don't know. I do like a form of art for a living. I'm a graphic designer. And I do know that like practice helps, but it's just like my fear is like, oh, what if I just practice forever and it never ever gets better? Like, what if I just never get it? Like, I suppose that would be okay. I mean, I like drawing. Drawing is stressful when it's like you're trying to draw something like specific, but just like drawing and coloring, like I like that. I don't know. I'll just keep practicing. I'm hoping that like 2 years from now I'll have like 700 live streams and I'll be like, look how great I got. Or like, look how bad I used to be and now I'm only sort of semi-bad. Maybe I'll even have like a follower. Wouldn't that be exciting? I wonder if they have this at the library. It's kind of racy. But also, that way it would be free. Support your local library, folks. If you don't have a local library, ask why. They're great. I don't know if that's exactly how he did it. Like this mouth, like especially the section under the mouth. Let's take a look. Because, like, yeah, I'm not, like, in love with that. Like, it's not, let's look at what Mr. Wood did. I think it's like this section at the bottom of his mouth. I feel like that is where, like, it's like, I don't know, maybe, not white, black, please. Maybe if we just kind of like tighten that up a bit. That's not quite right, but I feel like it's close enough. Okay, let's see. How long have we been going? Oh, okay, so almost an hour. I feel like I got pretty far. Got a couple panels done. I really like the way he does hair. I was glad to have the chance to work on that. I love that background. Oh, my text looks awful, but that's okay. Ugh, and those rocks. Sorry, I'm just like, oh, this is all so good that Wally did and not me. I made it slightly worse, but yeah. Like I always say, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you watch this. Let me know how comics impacted your gender identity. I'm kidding. Or do. I don't care. Like, I would love to know. Like, if I'm just full of crap or yeah, I feel like the best way to learn that you're wrong about something is to, like, say it on the internet. So if I'm wrong, let me know. If I'm right, let me know. I feel like I'm contractually obligated to say, like, comment, and subscribe, even though I'm talking to no one, and no one may ever listen to this but myself, but just in case. Thank you for listening. It was great to spend this time drawing, and yeah, maybe spend some time with you. Yeah, we'll see you next time. We'll go back and we're gonna do Hal Foster again. So we'll see you then.